live.
Yay!
And I think you should get a suck cut from Wayne's World. You're worried about your haircut? Get the suck cut.
Did you see my Wayne's World reference in the LinkedIn post I put together this week?
No, I haven't. No, I only read one of them.
This is the second one. The one that didn't even take me all that long.
Your LinkedIn posts, there's so much in them. I'm like, whoa.
Really?
There's so, yeah.
Maybe I need to break it down. There's
a lot of information. I think you need to break it down.
But what's ridiculous is the one I did on Friday. So I did one on Thursday night that ended up being a bit complex, but I managed to do it much longer than I thought. But it took me 3.5, 4 hours, which is way too long. Let's be honest. But of course, I start with one idea, then I build on it. Then I'm like, where am I going with this? Then it suddenly like, yes, treetop adventures. That is the right reference and analogy. But it's like that had nothing to do with anything before I started the post.
I've got to the point where I spend 25 minutes, half an hour on a post. Mind you, that's after I've planned it and structured it. Sometimes I'll do a plan and structure, go away, come back to it and knock it out in 20 minutes. But that's because I feel
extremely inadequate, and even more so when I hear things like that.
Yeah, but don't forget, at school, I'm writing exam questions against the clock with kids. I'm forced to write, and I'm forced to do it, and it's forced to be good, and I'm forced to write like a 15-year-old can understand it. And I've been doing this for years. So there's all this background of useful stuff that teaching has made that means I can do that. Yeah,
but I feel I should be able to do a lot of what I do faster.
It's just like I play guitar for 3 minutes at least every day, and I can feel it. It's got to the stage where I'm like,
to be fair, there's a lot of this that has to do with putting this visually into the carousel type posts.
Oh yeah, oh god, that takes
because the post ages. I did on Thursday, I wrote it out. Now I added and changed stuff as I was doing it, but the writing of it didn't take me all that long. It took me a little bit, but not that long.
Do you know what I do?
It's putting it in Canva, and then that's where I started having. It was like, oh, treetop adventures. That is the right analogy.
The tangent within a tangent within a tangent. Yeah, no. The what I do is I put it in a PowerPoint, set up the dimensions, export it as PDF, and then put it on LinkedIn. It's way quicker.
Oh, that'll be faster than working with Canva, actually.
Yeah, it was super fun. And you can set up the dimensions perfectly. I might have a template kicking around. I just don't know where it is.
That makes a lot more sense, actually. You're right, because Canva is great. It has a lot of tools, but then I get lost with visuals and all sorts of things. It's
horrible. It's just too fiddly, and then my internet goes down, and I'm irritated. Oh my god!
But now I have a bunch of stuff together, and I started putting some post ideas together. And yesterday I did one very quickly. I just bunched it out quickly. Just I want to keep a momentum of posting every day.
Yeah.
I would like to compare and contrast a little bit, but I would also like to follow some other advice I saw. Even though I'm getting sucked into the LinkedIn machine completely, I am basing myself on the notion, I believe, although it's worth checking, that the last big lead I had for the job that just fell through, which is part of the reason I'm a bit stressed out with the work at the moment, was out of all the posts I posted and the visibility I got in August.
It does.
The other thing I need to keep doing that is some of the highest and most visible posts are reposts of popular people. Adding one line. I know that I get a lot of impressions.
It
seems to help to alter. What do you think? What do you think?
I like the idea of creating. Maybe it's just me being pretentious, and these are creative sessions, and we are talking about creativity. But I think for me,
we are. But I'm also. I need to pay my rent.
That's true.
So yes, I need to create because that is my value, but I'm also looking at what gets me more impressions on LinkedIn. Now that's what I meant by getting sucked into the LinkedIn game, because I know that LinkedIn wins at that game.
It does win at that game, because I found that when I repost other stuff with a line or a comment, the following post that I had, the impressions were down massively.
Yeah, but I think you need to measure these kinds of things over several, I don't know, 10 posts or 20 posts.
Probably.
You might be right. I don't know.
Down, but I don't know.
There's one post I did in August that I thought was very smart, but I only got 100 impressions out of it.
One thing that really does work is that I noticed, and I only twigged after, is I put a comment on my own post after a day, the next day. That seems to like increase the number of impressions massively.
Mm.
Going
But
back and like, and I see posts where they have a carousel and they'll end with see the link in the comments or something along those lines. So I mean that seems to be quite engaging. I don't know how or why.
I'll try that. The other thing is I took a lot of time early this week, and I can only hope it's going to be valuable on the long run, to repackage the beginning of my course as slides to be shared with the wider community of strategists, of students. I have another teacher in South Africa who has like a learning community and asked me to put it up. And there's a lot of people who told me it was really great. So I have a lot of ideas for content to be writing. And I'm trying to figure out the best ways to do it. I still need to probably redo my website, but I'm also just, as usual, balancing it out with a need to find clients right now. And like, is it more effective to send individual emails to old clients, which I do some of, versus new discovery, getting found out? Because I didn't finish the thought earlier because I went on a tangent, of course. Did I finish that thought? That I'm pretty sure the last client opportunity I had found me through one of the posts that I posted on.
You did say that.
I said that. Sorry.
Yeah.
Anyhow, but yeah, there's been a lot going on, so that's good.
We're both talking. We were talking before about overwhelm and like loads of things happening, and how do I fit it all in? That's what I'm dealing with. Yeah. I'm like, I just the first few weeks of term have been ridiculous. And to start studying and be at the first week of term was just like,
well, yeah, and
almost the worst idea.
It's starting a big challenge with your master's at the same time. It's a lot of work.
It is, and I'm like, I can't. I go in and out of feeling really worried. Shouldn't have done this. This was a bad idea. And then I'm like, it doesn't matter when I would have done it. It would have felt like a bad idea. It doesn't make any difference. I would have experienced the same thing. And it is like this version of me can't handle it. I need to recreate myself and find a new version of myself to break through to the next level.
And
like, who am I going to be?
And the compounded difficulty, I think you tell me, is also that it's quite far away from your day-to-day and what your expertise is. It's probably some relationship, because I think you've done this in the past a while back. What I mean is it's not a master's in education.
No, it's not.
Where it would make a lot of sense, because it's what you live and breathe and what you talk about, what you write about. So it would be still a lot of work, but you'll be building on what the body of knowledge you already have and the practice you already have. Whereas your data science one is trying to pick things that you learned 20 years ago, but also is, I think, quite new.
I do think the principles,
which contributes to the challenge, is what I'm trying to say. It does,
absolutely. I do agree. I do think the principles of understanding how to think about and use data are very solid with me. But the intricacies of using the tool of Python or R, as we're going to be using, are like the core fundamentals of programming. Yeah, I know those really basic ideas like a variable and loops, and I understand that. But the intricacies of using Python to do data science, I'm like, this is hard, and I love it, but it's hard. And it's a time thing. Like, if I wasn't doing anything else, I'd just be happily immersing myself in this wondrous world. But no, I've got to plan lessons, or plan fewer lessons actually. And then this year at school, I'm doing over 11,000 steps at most days of the week, when I was averaging about 7,000 last year, because I'm spread out all over the damn place. It's ridiculous.
Oh, you're going to more classrooms than before?
Yeah, because we got a different site, it's my rooms. It's horrible. It's horrible.
Because the school has grown, or
it's kind of grown. They've repurposed one site.
The person who does the scheduling hates you.
Yeah. Oh, I have that anyway, because I taught in 15 different rooms in one year. But what it is that one site was for the super young kids that's been repurposed, so it's the older ones that I teach in that building, which is separate from the other place. Now the knock-on effect is teachers, other colleagues are saying to me, oh, I never see you anymore. I'm like, yeah, you don't see me because I'm over there. And I'm like, oh, I miss the going around shouting at the kids, you just lost the game. I miss the kind of random interactions and stories from colleagues. I don't have that because I'm just walking all the time. So that is adding an unnecessary level of, oh my God, my brain, it's ridiculous. It sounds so minor. Yeah, it sounds, and I think to myself, this is the other thing. I think I've told you this. Like, I listen to people that have children, and I'm like, that's hard work.
Yeah, I don't know how to do it.
Who am I to moan about this? I'm such a bad person for moaning about this.
Well, I think it's kind of just human. I'm amazed how the people with kids do it, or anything.
I know. Yeah,
I can't, and I'm amazed. I don't have children, and right now I have a lot of time technically, and the days go by, and I'm like, I thought all the things on my to-do list were really easy to achieve within the day. How come I've not finished all of them?
My parents are retired, and my dad will go, yeah, I didn't have time. I'm like, you don't work. What are you doing? It's human. It fills up. Stuff happens. At the same time, I don't feel I'm struggling, but I'm not disempowered. I don't feel.
Do you have
I'm overwhelmed, but I'm not like, oh my God, I hate this.
I was listening to you and was wondering if you have or if it might be good to have a buddy of some kind, somebody else in the masters, or somebody to work with, or somebody who knows this stuff to talk to, or I don't know.
There are people in it, and I've got a personal tutor, and I've emailed them. I'm going to have a conversation with them, and I can set up time to speak to the main tutor guys as well, which I'm going to do. And there are other people on the course, but it's all virtual. And it's all through message boards. And that's another little piece of friction where I'm like, oh my God. It's not like it's instant messaging, although I do have a WhatsApp conversation with one of the guys in the course. But I want to talk. I just want to have a conversation. Like, let's pick up the phone and talk. That would be just a bazillion times easier. But because we're middle-aged men, we want to talk. It seems like another generation, they don't want to talk on the phone. I love this.
But I think they're missing out.
I absolutely agree. Forget messaging.
The people who don't like this and are not used to it, this is reminding me of something that happened in my class, and I'm questioning at the moment the differences in culture and where they come from between the two establishments where I'm teaching.
Oh yeah, you've got like the US versus France, right?
Well, yes, and there's a bunch of different reasons why they're different, but I'm getting a whiff of different things, and so it's interesting to see or question those for So what I mean by that is in the French one, which is still an international curriculum, but it's a very French school, but it's also a vocational school. It's meant to like teach you how to work. So there's a lot of group exercises, which on one hand, to be honest, they do make it easier on the teacher to have less things to grade. But the other thing, which is also true, is to say that you need to collaborate and work as a group and deal with all the difficulties that means, because guess what? You're not going to like everybody you work with. And this kind of communication marketing environment, you tend to work in teams, which is also true.
There's group exercise in my stuff as well.
So there is also a ground foundation basis of some kind on being and working together, because the class still operates a little bit like high school, where the class is one group that everybody knows one another in the group, and so they're following the same kind of thing aside from a couple of little options. Whereas in the American system, unsurprisingly, a lot more individualistic. It seems like that, or at least that's what I'm wondering about, because they get to choose their own classes. So nobody in the class they all have different schedules. They all have different things going on. And it seems like they're having a harder time to collaborate when I'm asking them to do things together.
Interesting.
Now it seems that way. So this week, because I got a hint of it last week, I'm going to give them time to organize.
Yeah.
So I'm going to make sure because they also asked me, which is legitimate, for better guidelines for the assignments and everything. And in my run to prepare the syllabus, I haven't prepared for all the assignments yet, so I'm just catching up this weekend, which is fair. Because anyway, there's also, but where am I going with this? So I'm preparing the things they're asking me for that I thought, okay, it's legitimate that you're asking me this. I thought I had a bit more time to get it done, but I'll get it done. Now that I've got that done, you guys need to get together. And my impression was that there seemed to be things escalating to me of the nature of which would not appear as a problem to the French students, if that makes sense.
That's so interesting. It makes complete sense.
They have problems as a group.
Yeah.
But they only escalates to me when it's like, it seems to be a lot more serious than the things that I'm hearing about right now.
So interesting.
Now, there's also a different environment for the two schools. Aside from the cultural, like American individualistic versus group organization, it's not like Europe is a little bit more.
It's a bit less individualistic and a bit more groupy.
A bit more groupy.
Collective.
Then there's also another thing which is likely to be down to, and I don't know how much this matters at the graduate level. I think a little bit less, but maybe to an extent. But the American university is very expensive for Paris. The other one is also a private institution, so it's expensive, but nowhere near as much as the American university. So Paris. So there might be also a background question.
I'm paying money. Can you actually get this done with me now? Kind of thing.
And I read some papers on the fragility. I don't know if fragility is the right word, but I read a paper about how American universities and faculty are increasingly requested or assumed or expected to be more and more things to the students, which I think is also the case in a lot of other educational institutions. So like, you're not only expected to be a teacher, you're also expected to be a best friend, to be a shoulder to cry on, to be a carer, to be a therapist, to be a person who organizes things. And then there's another question that was interesting. So I
have that as a teacher. I do. Yeah.
I said, and also I got a little bit hooked on that one. So I don't think anybody's going to be listening to this from my class, but you never know. And it's just human, so it's not a bad thing. But and I might get over myself. We'll see. I started talking about the idea of doing a class out in Paris, in November. So, but they all have different schedules, so it's difficult to organize. So I asked, like, would anybody be willing to help me organize this? Nobody was willing.
Nothing. Interesting.
So I'm like, all right, well, you know what? Everybody's out for themselves. We'll just going to do this in the classroom. I don't see why I would bother going to do something outdoors or in a museum if nobody's willing to help me for a second.
Yeah.
I'm under a lot of pressure to organize this. No doubt you are too. I'm not saying you don't have work, students. You have a lot of work. You also have all sorts of things you're dealing with. But the principle is, we're not helping you. We'd love to go out to a museum, but nobody's going to help. I'm like, right,
interesting. So interesting. It's that, and so we were talking before about a whole bunch of stuff, life, the universe, and everything. This does fill in the podcast I want to tell you about. Like, so I do listen to Tim Ferriss's podcast, and I dip in and out. And don't
listen to a lot of podcasts anymore. Sorry,
because I know you were. You used to.
I used to listen to a lot, and these days a lot less. I dip in and out of some, but
and the only reason I listen to more is because I'm driving to and from school. But
I'm not supposed to listen to anything when I'm cycling in Paris, and I cycle a lot in Paris.
I see people cycling with listening to stuff all the time. I see people driving cars with AirPods in. It's ridiculous.
It is, but you're not supposed to. So it's technically illegal, and you can get stopped by the police if you're cycling in with earbuds. You're not supposed to. You need to be able to listen to what's going on.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway,
which makes sense to me. So I'm like,
it makes sense to me as well. So I'm not often moved and inspired and really deeply touched by podcast episodes, never mind Tim Ferriss's episodes. Like, I dip in and out. I think he's great. I think he's clearly been on his own journey, and he's a really interesting guy. But this episode was with a guy called Arthur C. Brooks, who has a regular column in some like deep thinking magazine in America. I can't remember which one.
Deep Thinking magazine. Okay.
I can't remember what it's called. Like, it's like one of those big magazines.
Sure.
I don't know what's so and he's a social scientist, studies happiness.
Mm.
And he's got loads of science-backed stuff about happiness. And there were points where I was very moved by what he was talking about and what he was saying, purely because of my own life experience and also what I'm dealing with now and the experience of feeling like what's happening. So very practical episode, loads of really cool ideas. The main thrust of it, and then I shared it with Davina, and Davina listened to it as well, and it's like informing our thinking. But he talks about happiness being made up of three things: satisfaction, I'm going to forget them, satisfaction and not pleasure, but the contentment, satisfaction, contentment, and meaning. And satisfaction is a combination of pleasure and memories. It's not about like eating cake by yourself. It's about eating cake with people. So you're doing stuff that's pleasurable and you're making memories at the same time. And that doesn't have to be expensive or whatever. He calls that satisfaction. And then, or contentment. No, he calls that contentment. And then satisfaction is grappling with something difficult and overcoming it. If you just do it and you get it without a lot of effort, then it's kind of boring. So, and I'm listening to thinking, oh, this is kind of what I'm dealing with here. And then meaning is, of course, the big one about like, what was my life about? And he has this whole conversation in the podcast about like, what would you die for? Like what is your life about? I was like, wow, what a massively deep question. Really cool. And then he also talks about something called a failure journal, where you keep a list of like where you struggled, and then you set a reminder for like 3 months and 6 months time, and you reflect back on that, and you start to see how the failures lead you through like to the path of where you're now. I'm like, that's a really cool thing to do, because I look back and I'm like, all the crappy stuff that's happened, it's informed so many of the paths and opportunities that have happened to me that I'm like, I look back and I go, actually, I wouldn't change it. I wouldn't change it. That was super interesting. And then the last super interesting thing was the false idols that we all have a particular preference for: pleasure, power, money, and fame. And it's from Aquinas. And then he goes like, yeah, Aquinas wrote all this stuff, but it has been borne out in the social science research that he's done and the science research that he's writing about. And he talks about how it coalesces. Like in New York, it's like, yeah, how much is your fund made? How much is the house? How much is the apartment worth? It's money. In LA, it's purely like fame and Hollywood. In Washington, it's power. And in Vegas, it's pleasure. I'm like, God, which one of those? And it's not like we chase all four of them. We have one,
and this is all still very
one.
American centric, which makes sense. But if you talked about another part of the world, it would be different cities with slightly different things.
Exactly. But what's interesting for me is thinking about which one is the strongest one for me. Is it pleasure? Is it fame? I'm like, I'm still grappling with it. And he's got a few questionnaires on his website, but it's really provoked an interesting, thought-provoking look at what I'm dealing with, and then putting it in context of like a bit like what we were saying before, like people have kids and they just get on with it. They deal with huge stuff. And part of me, on the one hand, is like, I could go for my master's and go for it and be like, this is what it takes. Or I could be I've been really disempowered this week, thinking like, what am I moaning about? I don't have big problems. And I think this is first world problems. Like, what am I moaning about? I should just get on with it. Or is it too much? Or all of that kind of stuff. Yeah. But this episode really made me think about, on a long enough timeline, the survival rate drops to 0. Like, what am I really worried about? We're here for however long we're here for. Yeah. Davina calls it like it's a blip. Like, what are we worrying about? Everyone's going to forget us in about 5 generations' time. Let's just make the most of what we have.
They'll forget you before that, maybe, depending on who you are.
Well, they're definitely going to forget me because, I'm just a pizza
aside from a few people, but
exactly.
I mean, I never met my mom's mother or my dad's father, so I don't particularly think about them.
Yeah.
That's my grandmother. That's just like one generation.
Yeah.
Sorry, second generation, let
But
alone the third.
well, yeah. So it's really got me thinking about like the small things like are cool. Like Davina and I sharing a meal,
Yeah.
like and sharing food. It's a cool thing. My parents coming over
And
later.
we'll forget those. I mean,
And
I've started noting along with you, thanks to your to these conversations or to just tracking stuff about life. You know, I updated a few things that I track. So I have a bunch of lists and journals, and
you're
I
still
was looking
journaling,
at
right? And meditating and all that.
yeah, meditating every day. I occasionally miss some when I go on holidays and stuff, but you know, journaling, same thing. Journaling, I've been having a little bit more of I mean, I'm still journaling. I'm not doing it the way I think I should or the way I'd like to, but I am still jotting down a few thoughts before I go
Yeah.
to bed.
Yeah.
So it's still journaling. And then I have these lists of like intricate lists of a bunch of stuff that I keep track of during the year. It's more or less depending, you know, the books I read, the movies I watch, the things I go see, the concerts, the entertainment, the seeing friends. Some of them more or less, like restaurants, I don't always keep track, but sometimes I do. All that to say, I looked and updated some of my lists yesterday, and I was like looking at a few things from even just a few months ago, and I was like, oh yeah, completely forgot I did that. That was great. It was good memories now that I think about it. Completely did not think about that, but that's fine. I mean, I take it as you know, everything I don't remember like that is just archived. It's fine. There's nothing, you know, holding me around it. It's all done. It's in the past. It's all good. I don't have any need to remember it right now for it to hold me. It's not luggage in any kind of way, if that makes sense.
It makes complete sense. And the things that you and I are grappling with, it's part of it's life.
Yeah.
And I can either be a massive mountain and deal and moany person about it or not. And there are times where venting is just the thing that I want to do, and it's totally fine.
Yeah,
and there are other
thankfully
times where
we
I'm
do
just
have.
overdoing
It's really important. I mean, we do have that, and I think it's really important for anybody who doesn't. One, to be able to vent and to have people to do it with, and to not asking for advice, just
just listen.
But there's a lot of people who don't tend to do that. And or there's the Reddit off my chest subreddit for that also. For what it's worth. Although I recently learned that there were people that really made a kick and spent a lot of time making up stories to add them to off my chest and to see like how popular they were. So now I'm very ambivalent about it since I learned that.
Yeah, it changes the context of it completely.
Yeah, it does. Even if I didn't comment or was just like randomly reading any kind of story. But just before I forget, because that was a tangent, what this makes me think of the podcast episode you finished, and then we should wrap up probably to not spend too much time. I know we're already spending a lot more time than what you wanted, but yesterday night I watched a movie that I think contrasts a bit, or at least I'm building a bridge to make it so. It's on Netflix. It just came out, called The Last Shift. I recommend it. It's funny how I thought it was a nothing movie, but it grew on me overnight. And now I'm listening to you and I'm like, wait, there's actually a lot in that movie. It's quite interesting. It's a good movie. It's not the movie of the decade or maybe not of the year, but that's also why it's interesting. It's a microcosm of how life can be difficult, and it's a microcosm of the everydayness of ordinary people in a shithole in the middle of America, as a microcosm for a lot of the massive societal problems that are going on in the country and in the world. Of not understanding one another, of dealing with difficult situations, of finding yourself, of like how you deal with a situation that usually you don't premeditate anything, you just do it one way, in a very human way, and in a cowardly, stupid, not thoughtful, the opposite. What is portrayed is the ordinariness that tends to be the opposite of what is portrayed in the kind of podcast that we're talking about, where we're looking up at the best of us, looking up at how do we do things, looking up at the people who are successful. And there's and it has the merit of being just an hour and a half.
Oh, good.
Very short. Or normal length. It's 2 episodes of a series, and you have a full story that builds, and that is not a happy ending, not a bad ending. It's just nothing, but it's a lot at the same time.
Wow.
And it's all about this old guy who's teaching a young guy to work in his fast food joint in the middle of the night. So there's very little going on, but it's also all about generational exchange, racism, institutional racism in America, because the young guy is black, the older guy is white.
Okay.
And a lot more other things.
Okay.
I think it's growing on me. It's like, I thought, oh, well, this is okay. But I'm like, actually, you know what? There's a lot of interesting things in this movie going on. I would be curious what you think of it. And there's also, the contrast is also on unhappiness, everyday life of what is tough and what makes us happy, what we think we should be doing that doesn't necessarily make us happy. That, anyway, it's worth checking out. It's it's quite I liked it, actually. Yeah, I really liked it, actually.
Well, cool, because the interesting thing for me about that podcast episode was that the guy's a Catholic.
Okay.
And
sorry, as in he's like really a believer, preacher.
Yeah. And my upbringing is Catholic, and I found that I don't know, it spoke to me in a way that I think it went a bit deeper than a lot of things.
Well, Catholics, I think the Pope is trying to change the brand.
How is he?
Well, I mean, I'm joking, but half joking.
Yeah.
Because he's trying to change the brand against a big, very traditionalist environment and centuries of culture of Catholicism that are not necessarily about being happy and accepting of a lot of different things. No, I'm completely saying this out of I have no idea. I'm just saying, I'm seeing occasional headlines about what the Pope says. I'm like, what? Really? Okay. The Pope says things about trying to go with the culture and the beliefs of the time.
Yeah, no, I did see something about that.
About different sexual orientations, or about acceptance, or about things like that. That some more traditionalists, which are many, are not really in the same vibe.
That would be the ultimate project, wouldn't it? Rebranding the Catholic Church.
It's a big project. And the other vibe I was thinking about, sorry, that brings it to your point about happiness, is this idea that Catholicism is also bent on suffering.
Yeah,
because he suffered for us, so we should suffer through life, and then our reward will be after we die. I know, and I'm again talking completely on, like, religion is not my specialty. I read a few things about it, but I'm kind of like talking of vague impressions. But it's making me think of the Max Weber book between comparing Catholic and Protestant culture in Europe, and a few other things. That's one of them.
Oh, cool. There's a lot going on for both of us, for sure. And it's always good talking to you. And I'm going to end with this.
Yes.
Which is, honestly, you might feel like you do loads of talking, but I can keep the fact that our conversation goes all over the place and we don't know where it's going to go is one of the things I most value. And that I don't feel like I have to explain too much other than the individual thought, which needs expounding and explaining and creating. I don't have to explain my thought process of how I got to where I got to very much. Or it's nice to be able to surf the kind of tangents.
Yes, it is.
Explore
and I find myself
wherever it's
having
going
to
to go.
Explain those things with the students is interesting. So I'm like, oh yeah, I could say this one, and I look at their faces and go, no, they didn't follow me. So wait,
exactly.
How am I gonna?
They have no idea what you're talking about. I know what you mean, but with you, I don't have that. I don't have that experience.
Please look at my last 2 LinkedIn posts of the carousels. I'm very curious to see what you think of them, particularly the last 2, the one with the Johnson & Johnson logo at the end, and the one about strategies in 3 things, because that I thought was a super simple post. I'm like, oh yeah, it's going to take me a few minutes, so we'll do that quickly. And then I went into a quagmire all day of like struggling with what I was saying to end up with something that is really simple, but I spent all day illustrating it, trying to put it together the right way.
That's the way it goes.
And I
Look, if it
really
looks
am glad that
simple,
very few people will be listening to the end of this conversation to admit that this thing in 12 slides, and one of them at the end is like, one is the intro, so 10 slides, really. 10 slides took me all day to illustrate something extremely simple that I think most people are like, yeah, it's so obvious. Why are you saying it?